Hi, I'm Erik Goldstein. I'm Senior Curator of Mechanical Arts and Numismatics here at Colonial, Williamsburg. And I'm going to talk to you about a really fun project that dates back about 10 years when I was tasked with furnishing the fireplace and firebox in the coffee room at Charlton's Coffeehouse. Now, as you can imagine, as a coffee house, it's all about coffee, which means all the good stuff is taking place in the coffee room. And of course, the coffee is made in the firebox right here. So that really is, in many ways, the heart of the coffee house, where the coffee is made. And in doing the research for this project, we were looking at all sorts of prints, and pictures, and descriptions of what a 17th or even an 18th century coffee house looked like. And we started noticing there were some really interesting things going on with the fireplace in the coffee house, in the coffee room. You'll notice above the mantel, we have a whole array of chocolate pots, coffee pots, some of copper, some of tin, in different forms that are waiting to be filled to dispense the liquid to whomever is going to be drinking it. And if you come and look at the fireplace, you'll see some pieces of equipment that you won't find anywhere else in Colonial Williamsburg's historic area. Again, thinking of the fireplace in the coffee room and the coffee house as the heart, and the coffee is the blood of the living institution, it all comes out of this spot. Probably the first thing people notice when they come in here is this big, giant copper spherical thing that looks a little bit like a still, but it's not. This odd device, again, no other example exists anywhere in the in the historic area, is a hot water cistern. So if you're going to be serving a lot of coffee, you need a massive amount of hot water, and it's always got to be ready. Well, how do you keep this hot water constantly hot when you're draining it? You're dispensing the hot water, and then you need to refill it with cold water. This means you need a very larger than normal fire than what you would need to heat a room, which is why we have this device right here. Kind of looks like what later would be a coal grate, but this is actually a set of what they call brand irons. Essentially, it is a pair of andirons, heavy-duty wrought iron hand irons, that are linked by horizontal bars. What this was meant to do was to allow a giant fire to be built in the firebox, built up high, built up really hot, that would keep the water in here piping hot. When it was dispensed out, it would very quickly heat up the newly added cold water. You also notice in front of the firebox, we have this long pot stand. Well, coffee isn't instantaneous. Everybody knows you have to have your grounds. You add your hot water and it's got to steep. But at the same time, you don't want it to cool. So pots that would have been filled with liquid and are being, maybe they're steeping, maybe they're being, people are just waiting for them to get up to temperature, or maybe they're queued up for dispensing at a later date. This is the spot where you keep them hot. So this is in front of the raging fire, and we have a copper coffee pot, we have a copper chocolate pot, and we have a tin coffee pot right here. These are the sorts of wares that we know based on archaeology and items that survive in the collection that were used in coffee houses in the middle part of the 18th century, very much like Charlton's. The problem that we ran into in 2009 in looking at these prints and realizing that we needed some specialized equipment is that nobody really makes them. It's pretty easy to get the brand irons and the long pot stand because what you have to do is walk into our blacksmith shop and talk to one of our many talented blacksmiths, show them what you want, and they can make that. That was great. We had a problem with getting a cistern and Copperware because essentially nobody makes these things. And this was in the days before we had the tin shop at the armory, so we had to make them ourselves. But we didn't have a copper smith or a tin smith, and Ron Hurst allowed me to read a copper manual from the late 19th century and figure out how to make these pieces. So from sheet metal, we made, or I should say, I made these pieces in 2009 for use here. It was quite a steep learning curve.
Erik, would you tell us a bit more about how you made the cistern?
Sure. It was a little bit complicated for us to figure out how to make the cistern because there are no surviving, or at least locatable that I could find, 18th or 17th century copper hot water cisterns. So being a good curator, I did what other curators would do. I looked for similar objects so I could see the vocabulary used by their makers. And for that, I looked at a lot of 18th century liquor stills, which were made very much like this cistern you see here. It's more or less a hollow sphere made of 3 parts, a bottom, a top, and a middle. Now you notice the pieces are soldered together and they're held by very strong copper rivets. Now these individual pieces were all raised. They were hand hammered from a flat sheet into the shapes that you see them now. It's a 2-piece lid so the cold water can be dumped in the top. And then down below, we have a foot ring, which is also riveted on. And we have a long spout with a spigot that allows the hot water to be dispensed very quickly and easily just by turning it. It's a pretty simple device in operation. It was a little complicated to make. I think the tens of thousands of hammer blows that I delivered to shape this copper drove everybody in my building nuts, but there was no other way we were going to get one of these things. And of course, the coup de grace for this piece is the iron bail with the ears, and of course the little handle for the lid that was made by Ken Schwartz, our master blacksmith, and we were good to go. We successfully created a proper 18th century coffeehouse cistern.